Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. My name is Tyler Hakes. I am the strategy director and principal at Optimist, and we have a pretty awesome topic that we're going to be talking about today. No pun intended. We're going to be talking about topical authority. We have our guest today, Stephen Jeske. Just to set this up for everyone, topical authority has marked kind of a radical transformation in the way that we think about content and SEO over the last few years. If you're like me and you kind of started 10 years ago or back in the day in terms of SEO, we thought a lot about keyword stuffing and all of these other kind of tactical things. But I think topical authority is really sort of the future of SEO and really the future of content marketing. And it's really about demonstrating expertise. Before we get any further in there, though, I just want to make my quick pitches here. So first and foremost, please like this video. That will help us get discovered by other marketers and share even better content in the future as we grow our audience. Second, please subscribe to our channel. We host these live sessions, Q&As, and workshops, and talk to smart people every couple of weeks. So I'd love to have you join us on future streams. So if you have not already, please subscribe. Number 3, if you have not already joined our group, Top of the Funnel, here's the link right here in the stream, yesoptimist.com/tofu, TOFU. Top of the Funnel is a free community on Slack for content marketers, SEO folks. We've got agencies and in-house people and freelancers and all kinds of folks in there. So if you want to meet some of the smartest folks in content marketing and SEO, would love to have you join our free community there. As an extra bonus, our guest today, Stephen Jeske, is going to be joining us after the live stream for a Slack Q&A. So if you want to pick his brain and learn even more about topical authority, or you have a burning question that you want to ask him, please join that community. You'll have your chance to chat with him directly in Slack here immediately after this live stream. So we'd love to see you there. Please join, and we'll be friends forever. Okay, so back to today's program. So again, as I said, today we're joined by Stephen. He's a senior content strategist at Muse. So if you're not familiar with Muse, they are an AI-powered software for content research, planning, and writing. They are particularly well known as a tool for folks who are trying to optimize content for search. And so today, we're really going to dive into one of the specific topics that's relevant to their software and to Stephen's expertise. And we're going to be talking about topical authority. So, in kind of this new world of SEO that we find ourselves in, where it's harder than ever to rank, it's more competitive, and the algorithm's constantly changing. Topical authority, I think, is sort of the new normal, the new way we should be thinking about SEO and about content marketing. And so, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our guest today. As I said, Stephen is joining us. Hey, Stephen, how you doing?
Hey, Tyler. Really happy to be here. I can't wait to start talking about topic authority.
Awesome, man. Yeah, really glad to have you on as well. And we were talking a little bit about your background and when you first got started, what was kind of SEO like as a content marketer?
Well, I mean, you can tell by looking at my beard. I've been around the block. I still remember the times in search where, you know what? You could rank really well for any particular keyword as long as you put it on your page enough times. And usually one page would do it.
Yep. Yeah, I remember the days of the one-page site where you would just build a page, like a single-page site, and go after some competitive keyword. And yeah, there's all kinds of keyword stuffing and cloaking and all that craziness.
Tyler, there's a lot of practices in SEO that have kind of a lot of people just kind of held on to them, even if they're not valid in this new environment that we find ourselves in. And that new environment has been around for quite a while, and it's always changing anyways. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the one thing you've got to be very, very careful about.
100%. Yeah, I think that's why I'm super excited to dig into this concept today of topical authority, because I think, as I said, it's really sort of the new foundational thinking, in my opinion, around SEO, right? So all of the old tactical stuff that we used to do that people hang on to, it's sort of obviously irrelevant when you start thinking about SEO through this different lens.
Absolutely. And, Tyler, I put together a bunch of slides to kind of help us keep track of where we're going, because otherwise, we could take tangents and go down all sorts of rabbit holes, and we'd be done our presentation. We'd be done in 1 hour. So.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great, man. Go ahead and take it away from here.
All right. Well, Tyler, this is probably the best slide to start off with, because it kind of relates to what you were talking about earlier. And really, when you think about this, consumers in general, we all want to do business with topic experts as opposed to a jack of all trades. And so what works for people actually works for search as well. Search engines really want to surface content that they know displays expertise, as opposed to content that doesn't, or specifically content that was just written for search. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of content just written for search, actually, often it fails. And the thing is that, do you want to create a site that's a valuable resource, or do you want to have just a jumble of articles? Because if you're writing just SEO content, more often than not, what you end up with is a jumble of articles. And again, this goes back to, this worked 5-10 years ago, where you could write a post and rank really well. You could optimize it. Even like 3 years ago, you could optimize a post and do very, very well. Times have changed. It's not quite the same as it was. And it really isn't enough to have that one perfectly optimized page. I know it's very frustrating to work your heart out. And a lot of these optimization tools, that's what they're selling, right? Just, use my tool, optimize the page, and you'll be good. It doesn't work that way. And unfortunately, nowadays, it's not even good enough just to have one content cluster. Quite often, that doesn't do it either. Things have changed. It's gotten so much more competitive. There's so much more content out there. And when people structure their content very, very well, that's when it gets hard. A couple of years ago, well, actually, we're coming on to 3 years ago, Google introduced the topic layer. I don't know. It didn't seem to gain very much traction in the SEO world. But for me, I got very, very excited when I saw this. And the part that I really want you to pay attention to is this in the second paragraph. The topic layer is built by analyzing all the content that exists on the web for a given topic and develops hundreds and thousands of subtopics. Now, this is straight from a Google. This is Google blog. This is exactly what they're talking about. They're telling us what they're doing, and they can identify the most relevant articles and videos. So Google has this capacity to understand topics, and therefore they can understand whether or not you've got an authority around a specific topic. Now, one of the things is that topic authority isn't EAT, right? EAT, very popular right now, big thing in the world of SEO. And that's about expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. One thing to keep in mind is EAT is really something that the Google search, lost my train of thought. The people that are employed by Google, search raters, search quality raters, they actually use, and Google has published their search quality ratings guideline. They use a guideline, they follow that, and what they're doing is just giving feedback to their machine learning mechanisms to verify that Google can pick up certain signals to understand whether or not somebody should actually be talking about a particular, whether they're qualified to talk about a particular subject. For example, let's say I have an orthodontist that I bring my daughter to. Mm-hmm. He happens to publish hundreds of articles on orthodontistry. And of course, he has his, all his legitimate credentials, and they're there on his website. So Google can pick that up. And, let's say, Tyler, that this whole marketing thing wasn't working out, and I decided to become an orthodontist, right? Went out, got my degree, put up a website, stuck my credentials up there so Google can know that I'm a bona fide orthodontist. And I decided that I'm going to start writing. So I write one article. All right, I've got my EAT all lined up. So it can show that I have the credentials to talk about it, but I certainly don't have the topical authority like my daughter's orthodontist does, who's written hundreds of articles on it. Mm-hmm. So does that make sense? I certainly hope so. I know a lot of people are so hung up on EAT, but for me, that's just the start. That's your ticket to talk about stuff. And I should mention too, really EAT comes into effect for the your money or your life, YMYL, that type of content. For other content, quite often it doesn't. And Google says that there's lots of subjects that you don't have to have any qualified expertise, other than if you talk about it a lot, that can self-qualify as an expert. And the other thing I should mention too is that when we're talking about topic authority, we're not really talking about domain authority. And the reason is domain authority is a metric that certain companies have developed, and that is actually all link-based.
Yep.
Okay, and links have become less and less important as time goes on. That can be kind of controversial, talking with a lot of old-time SEOs. They still think that links are the dominant factor in ranking, but it's not. It can come into play when you're talking about topic authority, but it's only like a subset. So I don't want to get hung up on domain authority. Mm-hmm. Answering your prospects' questions is sort of offered up as a typical way of gaining topical authority. And you know what? It is great in principle, and that used to work really well years ago, where you could just start writing content here and there. Just as long as you're answering your prospects' questions, you would do well. The problem now in this environment is the competition. This will work in low competitive environments. You really don't have to worry about any strategy. You can just kind of pick them out of the air, so to speak, and just answer questions, create articles that answer all those important questions, and that'll work. But once you get into the higher competition types of topics, that approach doesn't really work. And if it does, it takes a long, long time to get anywhere. And for me, the whole purpose of content strategy really boils down to quite often just finding out the fastest route to being recognized as an expert. Mm-hmm. Right? When you boil everything down to what a content strategist has to do, that's really what they have to do. People will phrase it in different ways, but when it comes to actually getting your content to perform, and really we're talking about content performing well in search, that's the role of a content strategist. Mm-hmm. Keyword difficulty in search volume is another way that's often bandied about as a way to get to that topical authority. But for me, I just find it to be the worst approach ever. The problem is that when you use that approach, you don't build a proper foundation, and you end up with a lot of holes in your content. Not to mention that one of the major problems is that keyword difficulty, again, is a metric a lot of people use because there's many tools that offer that up, and it's link-based. It's solely link-based with maybe a little bit of SERP feature thrown into it. Again, there's nothing to do with content. At Market Muse, we actually use personalized keyword difficulty. It's a metric we've developed, which actually takes into account all of your content that's on your site, looking at how that ranks. Because really the problem with keyword difficulty is it's generic, right? When you look at the keyword difficulty rating for, I don't know, let's keep on going with orthodontistry. Market Muse would have just as hard a time ranking for anything to do with orthodontistry than my daughter's orthodontist would. And we know that deep down, it just does not make sense. So we actually use personalized difficulty as a way to incorporate how your content is performing. So, but I don't want to get into that because really then we're starting to talk about the different strategies in obtaining topical authority. Really what I want to do is talk more about in general terms about how to approach topical authority, as opposed to getting down into the weeds of it. So really, achieving topical authority is a result of creating content that goes into depth on a variety of closely related topics. In a way, I regret saying goes into depth, because a lot of people all of a sudden assume that when you go into depth on something, you're writing like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 word blog posts, 10,000 words. That used to be a thing too, especially among marketers. They would brag about, I just wrote a 10,000 word blog post. Google doesn't care about that. What they really care about is content that's informationally rich, and that actually adds something to the conversation, as opposed to just regurgitating. And the other thing too is getting that content that goes into depth, and creating that isn't enough either. You really have to work to internally link those content clusters. First, you're going to link your content into clusters, and then you got to connect those clusters together as well. So you have clusters upon clusters. And really, the way I look at it is practically any piece of content can fit into a cluster. And even if you're going to start off just with one piece of content, I'm always looking to see, well, what else can I write about that? Where can I go into greater depth in another article to expand on something I've said in that article? So I never view one piece of content as an island.
Stephen, could you just give us an example of like a topic cluster that maybe you've worked on, and some of the related content that lives within that same cluster?
Yeah, I mean, if you go and look at our blog on Market Muse, we talk a lot about content strategy. And that was something that 3 years ago, really, when it started with Market Muse, that was something I decided to do intentionally, because you've got so many blogs talking about content marketing. And I realized that content strategy was something that we would have a better shot at doing. And also, back then, Market Muse was the software did not have the capabilities that we have now, so I couldn't even tell how hard it would be. It was more like just a gut check and knowing. Because back then we didn't have personalized difficulty. We didn't have authority scores. Like, we calculate authority scores based on how your content performs, all that sort of stuff. So it makes it a lot easier now. But back then I was just using a gut check, and it just made rational sense. And so we approached it just simply by working through so much content that dealt with content strategy. And for example, too, if you look at topical authority on our blog, I talk a lot about topical authority in all sorts of different contexts. And those are all linked together. And we'll talk about that too, as how I end up linking them together, and a process that you can follow.
Great.
So the idea here is that I use topic modeling. And I use topic modeling to help me build content and also tie that all together. And the reason I take that approach as opposed to a keyword approach is that it really helps me build a strong foundation. And at the same time, I can identify topical gaps. You're going to have topical gaps. You can't avoid it, especially if you're starting to pursue a new site, or even if you're starting to pursue a new topic. But knowing those topical gaps exist is sort of half the battle, because you know what to fill in and where to move forward with. So the other thing to keep in mind too is that topic models are not equal. And I wanted to put in this slide because this drives me nuts when I see people talking about term frequency, inverse document frequency, otherwise known as TF-IDF. You may see this around sometimes, like on Twitter or some social media. People talking about how it's one of these new technologies, and I put the date in there. Term frequency was something developed in 1957. Technically, inverse document frequency was added onto that in the 1970s. So yeah, back then, right? Most people around here probably weren't even born back then. Back then, it was a novel thing. Now it's not. And the other thing too, I'm not too sure if I mentioned another slide, so I'll just say it right now. Although Google uses TF-IDF, and I'm about to publish a post on our blog as well about this, it's not in the way people think. They use that for text processing, but it's not used to understand and create topic models, to understand the semantics behind different topics. So going out and using a cheap or a free TF-IDF tool won't actually help you. That's the long story.
Can we just pause there for a second and just kind of define topic modeling and how you're applying this to your process?
Yeah, and in fact, I'm going to talk about it later on in a couple of slides.
Okay, sorry. Got ahead of
it. And the reason I'm explaining this too is that topic modeling, I guess I'll just say it briefly right now. Topic modeling really is about establishing these semantic relationships between topics. Reading words on a page and turning those words and understanding those words as topics as opposed to search terms. Keywords are search terms. Keywords will tell you how people search for stuff, but they don't tell you how to create content. Mm-hmm. They don't tell you what to talk about when you're talking about content strategy, for example. They won't tell you all the different things that you should mention in your post. They won't talk about the different sections. Which topic modeling, that's the whole point behind that. You can do a lot of keyword research on content strategy and you'll come up with 100 different ways to search for that term, but it still won't tell you what you need to put in an article to talk about that, or what to put in a cluster to really fully explore that topic. And I'll show you some examples too along the way.
Great.
Latent semantic analysis, I put that in as well. Also known as latent semantic indexing. Again, that's another old technology. And I just want to put that in there because you may have heard the term LSI keywords. I want to be clear, LSI keywords do not exist. They are just a term that SEOs use to make themselves look smart. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. So you can disagree with me or agree with me, which either way, but that's the way it is. And the last one I put in here with the latent direct allocation, that's 18 years old now. That's kind of, in the overall scheme of things, that's really what started off topic modeling. The problem with the latent semantic analysis, by the way, is that it was developed before the internet. And so it's hard to model the internet because you're always adding topics to the internet, right? That corpus or that collection of documents keeps on expanding by the minute as we're talking. People are publishing thousands of articles right now as we speak. Latent semantic analysis was always really made to develop to work with a fixed database. We have our own. Muse has its own patented topic modeling technology that we developed like 7 years ago. First filed back in 2015. It's kind of based on LDA, but it goes a lot further into details because there's a lot more that we have to do than just using LDA. If only it were that easy. Here is an example, and I'm going to talk about at the page level. You want to be able to provide comprehensive topical coverage. So here we're looking at content strategy. And what you see here are all the different related topics that deal with content strategy. So if I'm talking about content strategy, here are the things that I'm going to want to include in my content. These are different concepts that I need to talk about. On the side as well, you know what, if I was smart, I would have just cut that off just to talk about the topics, but now everybody's going to see the other stuff. So I better talk about that a little bit. On the side, on the far right side, you'll see suggested dist. That's the distribution. And really what that does is it gives you an idea of how in-depth you need to approach those different topics. This is not mention this 5 times to rank for that keyword. All right, this is not keyword density. It has nothing to do with keyword density. I know a lot of people might approach it that way, but that's not the way I ever approach it. It's just an understanding of how detailed you need to go into specific topics when you're talking about what we call the focus topic. So in this case, the focus topic is content strategy. I'm going to want to talk about a lot of different things, including your target audience, content planning, content strategist. You know, if I'm going to include content strategist, I'm probably going to want to talk about their role, what they do, maybe just in a superficial way, because if I'm talking about content strategy in general, not going to have enough time to go into detail on what a content strategist does. right? Because if I spend half my article talking about what a content strategist does, suddenly it's not really an article on content strategy anymore, right? It's more like an article about content strategists. But you can also use this, and I show it a little bit later on. You can use this type of topic modeling to give you some ideas of where you can look and fill in different pieces of content. So, for example, if I'm going to be talking about content strategy on my blog, I'll probably want to create a post on content strategists. Like, what do they do? Or how to hire a content strategist. Or, if I have an audience that is also consists of content marketers that are kind of thinking of getting into that realm of content strategy, and they want to know how to get into it, maybe I want to do like a day in the life of a content strategist. Maybe I want that to be a post. So this is how I use the research and from a topic modeling perspective to actually understand where I can fill in gaps beyond the page level. I want to use this at the page level, but I also want to go beyond it. Because as I said before, one page isn't enough anymore.
And so just to give context for folks here, so this is a screenshot from Market Muse, right? Gotcha. And can you talk a little bit about kind of how Market Muse derives these topics?
Yeah, sure. What we do, our topic modeling, we go and we'll search through hundreds, and depending on the topic, even thousands of pages on the web to build our topic models. Because we have our own infrastructure to do this, as opposed to what a lot of other tools will do is they'll take a shortcut. They will look at the top 20 posts for your search term, and that's how they will construct their topic model. There's a problem with that in a couple of ways. First of all, think of a topic, all right? Tyler, think of a topic that you're comfortable with and that you know a lot about. Do you think that the top 20 pages in Google cover that? Like, that's it? You can just read the top 20 pages in Google and you'll be fine? Probably not. And a lot of the times, so depending on the term and the topic, sometimes those results can be like really bad.
Right.
And there's another problem too, is that if you're just relying on the top 20 for your topic model, you're going to end up creating copycat content, right? One thing I didn't show, because really this is not about Market Muse and the platform, so I didn't show other stuff, but we have a way of actually surfacing this, and you can actually see where there's content gaps in the top 20 in our Compete application. We actually have like what we call a heat map full of squares, and you can read it and you can see if certain pages are not covering a topic, if a specific page is not covering certain related topics. And so those are the sorts of things you can do when you start building out topic models using a large, what they call corpus, a collection of documents. So we either use a large corpus or a collection of documents to create our topic model, as opposed to using just a small set.
And so, yeah, so just to put a point on that, so the topics that are shown here are basically, here is all of the related topics that we think should be included in the content.
Right.
Yeah.
And we will actually return 50, and we sort them by relevance. So the highest relevant topics are up at the top and the lowest are on the bottom. And we actually use this too when we start thinking of anchor text and how to link other pieces together. We use the exact topic model in that as well. And I'm going to show you how we do that and how I actually like apply that. The other thing too is answering questions. Now that you do definitely want to work this into your content. I've shown on the left side is again, that's Market Muse. We have a questions module where we go out and how I was saying we analyze this huge corpus of documents. At the same time, we can extract all the different types of questions that people are asking for around that particular topic. And if you're not using Market Muse or you're not using anything and you're just rolling your own, quite often people will use the people also ask in Google. You got to be careful about that because a lot of times what Google will do is, and the people also ask, they serve a mixed bag of intents. Those questions actually address a mixed bag of intents. So you got to be careful about incorporating that on the surface just into your content. Quite often you're better off drilling down. You can drill down into those different questions in Google, and the people also ask, and you'll see that the questions change as you drill down. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're going to use it. Don't just rely on the superficial top part that you see and call it a day. Really drill down. And the other alternative that's popular too is the answer the public. Very popular one. It can work. Sometimes it doesn't work very well because they've got a certain format. And so if questions fit that format, great. And when questions don't fit that format for the topic that you're exploring, then you're in trouble. But you know what? If that's all you got, it's worth it. At least it gets the mind thinking, right? Even if you can't use the data, it's free. And you know, if you don't have the budget for paid stuff, free is better than nothing. Sometimes it can be a distraction, but you know, you live and learn. I do want to talk about the internal and external linking strategy because that's so critical too. Again, when I'm talking about one page isn't enough, that's because you need more than one page quite often to address the topic in its entirety. And when you talk about having multiple pages, the key here is you want to use appropriate anchor text, and the pages that you're linking to need to have relevance and they need to have quality. So first, let me talk about the internal, because that is actually the most important. Here in that topic model again, I showed this is sorted by relevance. And what we end up using when we're linking these things is we're going to use highly relevant anchor text that's high up in our topic model, because it has the most relevance to our focus topic. So that means that if I'm doing a post on content strategy in that particular article, I'm going to be wanting to link out to other content that I have that revolves around content strategists, what they do, digital content strategy, defining your target audience, those sorts of things. Because those are the signals that will help Google understand that I'm a topical authority on this, because I'm talking about things that have the most relevance. Now, that's a little bit different than the external. I'm going to talk about the external in a minute. The other thing we want to do is we want to match the anchor text with the high quality and relevant URL. In Market Muse, we do this right ourselves. You know, you can enter in your topic. Again, we're sticking with content strategy, right? We just wrote an article with our focus topic on content strategy. I want a link based on that same focus topic as well. And what we end up doing is we take the most relevant topics, the related topics high up on the model, and then we look through your content on your site. And we try really hard to offer, usually for each, we have 10 anchor text suggestions that we'll offer, and we'll have up to 10 URLs for each anchor text as a suggestion. And you know what I do, and what I always advise when I'm doing this for our own blog, I'll go through and I'll make my selection, which one I'm going to use, and it'll be based really on editorial relevance. The ones that are closer to the top, for example, in content strategy, the things that are closest to the top, the URLs are the most relevant. For example, under content strategy, the one on the bottom, save the date, don't miss it. That was for our content strategy collective, which was like it was a 3-day content strategy festival. It was like just a remote event. So that really doesn't have editorial relevance as much as one of those other posts. The other thing I'll mention too is quite often the developers design this in a way that it really works so hard to find stuff. And sometimes it finds stuff that just isn't good. And if you're filled with bad suggestions, they do that as opposed to no data. Sometimes I wish they'd just return no data, but they don't want to do that because it's like, no, you got stuff, it's just not good. So when you get a lot of stuff that's not good, for example, on content strategy, if I'd never written about content strategy, I'd have terrible suggestions here. And so that is a clue to me. I got to write some content. I need to write some content about content marketing and link out to it from my piece about content strategy. So there's really two ways to think of this. Think of this as linking out to existing content, or if you really don't have good existing content, then you need to create that in the future.
And so I think this kind of gets to the heart of like the whole concept of topical authority, right? Which is having related relevant content on a variety of topics within the same cluster, and then also sort of connecting those through a smart internal linking strategy to sort of demonstrate that expertise.
Yeah. For all the talk about Google being so smart, it really isn't. And we really do have to like spell it out in our content. That we really do have to make these connections, because it's not just enough to have each article residing on your website.
Right.
That won't work. And that's why it's so important to make these connections. And you know what, too? The other thing is it does benefit your readers, right? Because they're going to want to further explore the things you're talking about. And that gives them the opportunity to do that. Now, we should also talk about external linking, only in the sense that it won't necessarily develop your topical authority, but your readers will expect to see it, and so do search engines, right? Google expects to see links out. If they don't see links out, that raises flags. Like, I'm absolutely convinced that raises flags, that there's something wrong. First of all, you may not notice it as a reader, but Google will notice the lack of outbound links.
Right.
Now, the key here is that you just want to, it's a balancing act, right? You want to offer relevant links, good stuff to link out to, but you don't want to be linking out to your competitors in the SERP, because although links have diminished in their usefulness, you still don't want to give away, right, any advantage to your competition, no matter how small, because a link is a vote. It's still a vote. So why vote for your competition? So here's what our strategy is we take that topic model and we look for related topics further on down the list. So I'm showing the content strategy on the left side where it says research, but this is actually on the lower part of that 50 topics in the model. So this is towards the bottom. And we always look for topics towards the bottom because they're adjacent, right? They're adjacent to the main topic. And so we still find high quality pages, and we do the same thing. We always offer a bunch of suggestions, of page suggestions for each anchor text, so you can look at them and decide which one is the best for editorial relevancy. But we avoid the linking out to direct SERP competitors. A lot of junior writers that are just coming up in the field will often make that mistake. If they just look at the top, if they're doing their writing based on the top 10 in their search results, often what they end up doing is, they find some good information and they feel like, I've got this information. I have to credit my source. And so they link out to the top entry. Yeah. And then they wonder why they can't become the top entry. Yeah. So I'm not saying don't credit your source. What I'm saying is don't, look beyond your SERP competition when you're doing your research and you're thinking of how to approach a topic. Yeah.
Real quick, if you don't mind, Stephen, we had a question that I think would be timely here. So David was wondering how to identify the subset of topics that are most relevant to your niche or whatever the subject is that you're covering. Right. And so obviously you've shown us Market Muse, and you can get this data from Market Muse. Yeah. Are there any other tools, or is there another strategy or way that you would recommend folks who aren't using Market Muse?
I mean, yeah. you want the free version, paid version. I mean, there's other paid tools that you can use. And if you're going the free route and you're wondering, how to identify those topics, it gets hard. And you can't take the approach that we take, right? Because humans just don't have that capacity to analyze thousands of documents fast. So that's out the door. You can gain some insight from Google itself in terms of those people also ask questions. Keyword tools don't help. I shouldn't say they don't help, but the problem is, what it comes down to is they often you're ending up with thousands of keywords, and they only tell you really how to search for a specific term. I'll give you an example. Ben Saylor from CoSchedule wrote a wonderful guest post on our blog, and he had this diagram or an image, and what it was, I forget the exact topic or the keywords. He was explaining this in terms of keywords, and it was about playing guitar. And so as the editor, of course, I went in and I sort of made my notes and actually included them in. I said, that this is a great way, but just keep in mind that the drawback is that you end up with all sorts of search terms about how people are searching when they want to learn to play guitar, but you don't come up with topics that you should include to play guitar. So if you do use keyword research tools, just remember that you're going to have to go through literally thousands of keywords. The problem is quite often those what they call related keywords aren't very related at all. That's actually what we call variants in Market Muse terminology. Quite often, like what we call a variant is you'll take like content marketing effort as your root keyword, and then maybe you'll append something or add something onto the end, right? And that's what we would call a variant because it's a variation of that main keyword. A lot of tools will call that a related keyword. So they'll, content strategy, PDFs will be a keyword that's related to content strategy. Sometimes that can give you good ideas of topics to approach, but you just have to wade through a lot more data if you're not using topic modeling. So if you do have a keyword tool and you can't afford anything else, then you can make use of that. But you have to really dive in and try to group keywords together. And then try to, from that grouping of your different keywords, trying to extract some sort of semantic similarity in that approach.
One other thing I'll just throw out there for you, David, is something that we do is kind of a manual version. It's sort of a lo-fi version of a tool like a Market Muse or something like that. But open up a spreadsheet, put some of the competing documents in there, and sort of list out the topics that they are covering side by side, and sort of build that map a little bit by yourself. Obviously, that's very time intensive and not as comprehensive as a tool like Market Muse, but that's something that we've done in the past. As sort of a lo-fi version of that, is to just say, okay, here are the top 5 articles. Here are all the subjects covered in each article, and you might be able to just like scan the headings or kind of glean a quick understanding of what those topics are, and that'll at least give you a starting point. Obviously, you can go down that rabbit hole as far as you want, but that'll give you a bit of a primer there.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I mean, I used to do that like years ago before I had access to this technology. That's what I would do. The one challenge, though, is that if you're not a subject matter expert, it can be tough trying to extract the right topics if you don't really know much. And that's what David is. That's David's point, is I'm not a subject matter expert.
Right.
How do I extract it? If you're not a subject matter expert, then that's tough.
For sure.
Doable, but it's tough.
Indeed.
So that's about external linking. And again, it's critical because one page isn't enough. Now, the thing too, I know we're probably running down to our limit because we're going to go into Q&A, but there's a couple of other things I want to talk about. Is that okay, Tyler?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. you should use your topic modeling to create additional pages addressing those related topics. I mentioned it before, and so just on the bottom of this here, I do a simple diagram to kind of illustrate that. So if I'm talking about content strategy, it's not just enough to have one page. I want to have pages on related topics, like I said before, about developing a target audience, having a content plan. All of those could be separate posts or articles, and they would all be linked together. You want to apply this recursively and to drill deeper down. Again, in my limited ability to draw, I showed a simple way to get the point across, right? So before we were creating an article on content strategy, we want to create one on content strategists. All right, well, if I'm creating one on content strategists, what could I create to support that particular topic and link to it? And so I would use my content model, again, to figure out what things I could talk about, not only just in the page, but I could elaborate. So, I see down here, one of the things I see skill. All right, content strategy, skills, right? Skills for a content strategist. That would be a really great topic to talk about, or developing those skills, because I see that quite often. I'm in quite a few different Slack communities, and you see this all the time. People are wondering how to upgrade their skills. So I'm right off the top of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, there I go. That's something. And, we talk about content strategy on our blog. Now I'm sort of thinking about, I don't have anything that addresses that. Maybe I need to go out and write an article on content strategy skills for our blog to round that out. So, this is also, again, I'm thinking, this is a great way to identify those topical gaps, because everybody has them, even we have them. Mm-hmm. The other thing, too, is you need to be able to connect those existing topics and clusters. And so what you really want to do, and we don't have a lot of time to get into this, so I just drew it out here simply, is when you have two different topics, two different clusters of topics, you want to find something that can connect those two. Mm-hmm. And you want to be able to draw that connection in that piece of content. Yep. So if you have clusters and they're residing just by themselves, having clusters is great. Make no mistake about it. It's better than not having any at all. But ideally, you should be able to link those clusters up together. And you do that by looking for those connecting topics.
Right.
So sometimes you can use a topic model. Sometimes you kind of need to go beyond that and just use some good old ingenuity. Like you could run topic models to find some sort of overlap between two clusters of topics and do it that way.
So just to give an example of this, so if we're starting with content strategy as one topic, and that's sort of and there's a cluster of articles or pages that come out from that, what might be an example of an adjacent cluster that is
right? Okay,
related but separate enough, I guess.
Yeah, I have a good one. I noticed in the content strategy model there was an entry for a related topic about social media. So if I wanted to talk a lot about social media, I could build out a cluster. But I don't want to have this be just a blog about social media, right?
Right.
So I want to connect that. So I could connect social media to content strategy. Mm-hmm. And this is where that kind of human ingenuity could come into play. I'd think about, well, how am I going to connect that? I know they're related. Mm-hmm. What role does social media play in content strategy?
Right.
I don't know. Well, maybe that's it. The role of social media in content strategy.
Yeah, that's how, I think that's very, very illustrative, though, of these are obviously adjacent and related topics, but they are not. The Venn diagram has only a small overlap, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
Real quick, if you don't mind, can I pause for one more question from our audience here?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. So I think this is a really important question, because so Troy's asking, when you end up having your pages competing with each other. So I think this is going back to your example before of you drill down kind of recursively into these subtopics, and at some point that is just like a section of a bigger article rather than its own page, right? So the example might be that you shared was like content strategist versus like content strategist skills. So how do you sort of differentiate whether that's sort of a competing page, or it should be like a part of an existing page.
Right. Okay. Now we're getting in a lot of tactics. Quite often, and this is good because this is something that you can actually take advantage of. For example, quite often you'll have a very powerful page that ranks for a number of search terms. So you could have a piece, coming back to content strategy, that ranks for all sorts of these different related topics. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they won't rank very well, mm-hmm. right? But your page is powerful enough, and you've got enough authority that you can rank, and maybe you're ranking like on somewhere low second page or something like that. Yep. And quite often, that will be a great opportunity to end up creating a new page on that specific topic. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I love having 2 pages in the SERP.
Right.
Nothing wrong with it at all, especially if they're up on near the top. I wish, had I known this question was going to come up, I would have brought an example along. I have a great one with IBM. And I forget what it was. It was a specific topic where they're talking about probably something AI related. And they have their own blog, their own site has the top 2. They have a video, because there's a video pack in the SERP as well. Their video is the top video there. They have a separate subdomain that also is ranking for that. So I love it. Mm-hmm. The key, the problem, or the reason that people are worried about pages that they say they're competing against each other, they're not. Your pages don't compete against one another. The real question is whether or not you're addressing the intent behind the search term sufficiently. And if you're not, then they don't rank well. I mean, there's other reasons for pages not ranking well, but that's most often what happens.
Yeah. If you don't mind, can I just jump in with kind of 2 takeaways from what you shared there? So one, I think you nailed it. That's the same approach that I would take is looking at some of your pages that already rank, ideally, rank somewhere in the top 100 for a lot of keywords, and sort of mine that for opportunities as you pointed out, right? So stuff where, hey, I rank position 20, so it doesn't really, I'm not really competing with myself, even if that were a thing, I wouldn't really be competing with myself because I'm not really getting any traffic from that anyway. But that's an opportunity to kind of go that next level and build a sort of a supporting piece that is related to this topic and maybe a long tail or a specific version of that, which I think is awesome. And then the other thing too that you mentioned is like the thing that we see more and more is sort of these mixed intent SERPs. I think that's another way to analyze it too, is to do the query and see what's ranking. And a lot of times, if you search for content strategist skills, is it all job postings, or is it a mix of, content strategist, job description overview, and then some posts that are specifically about content strategist skills? Because a lot of times that means that you have an opportunity there to also rank multiple pages if the intent is a little bit mixed there.
Yep. And that's where the content strategy part comes into play. Mm. Right. And this is why you take advantage of a content strategist. You have to figure out all these things.
Indeed. Thank you for letting us dive into that.
Yeah. So actually, I'm at the end. So if we have any other questions that are coming through right now, we can talk about them, or anything that anything that's on your mind about content strategy. It doesn't actually have to be about topical authority, because I get the feeling that Tyler and I could talk for a long time about this stuff.
It's all just down the topic cluster.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, okay. So, first of all, real quick, I'll jump into some of the questions that we've gotten so far. I do want to just make one more quick plug for our group here, top of the funnel. As I mentioned at the top of the broadcast here, we're going to get a couple extra minutes with Stephen immediately after this in our Slack group. So if you have additional questions or we don't get you to your question, please join us there, and you'll have a chance to talk and nerd out with us some more on topical authority. So with that said, let me go ahead and just dive in here to a couple of questions that we've gotten. So we got a question here about launching a new blog, like kind of maybe walk us through what are some steps that you're thinking about in terms of establishing that topical authority or your strategy for establishing it.
Okay. First of all, you're going to have to be patient. That's one of the toughest things. Really, it is. It's one of the toughest things.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't be worried about ranking anything. I would be worried just about making sure that I'm covering, creating my foundation and creating it efficiently. So one of the things I'd want to do is I would want to create, for lack of a better term that people use, pillar page, right? A topic or a page around your main topic. And God forbid that we were creating an insurance website, but let's just, for argument's sake, say we were. Because we have nothing better to do with our time. So we're creating an insurance website. I would create a page on insurance, just in general terms. I know I can't rank for that, but people are going to expect to see it. And you know what? Eventually, I'm going to need that piece. And this way, if I create that piece up front, when I create my supporting content, I can actually link to that existing page, pillar page, as opposed to if I create supporting content pages first, then when I create my pillar page, I'm going to have to go back,
right,
and update all those and make sure that I don't forget that link. So
that's a super interesting point, because I think, at least in my brain, I think generally of like Topical Authority as building the supporting content to support your pillar content. But it also works the other way, right? Yep. It also works that having that pillar content, even if it doesn't rank, sort of legitimizes some of the other supporting content that you're building out.
Yeah. And the thing that you've got to really be careful about is just stay away from the keyword difficulty trap. Because the trap there is that if you're not thinking about topics and developing your topical authority, you're just thinking about what do I think is going to be easiest to rank for, is you get these, like, if I could actually show you a diagram, it'd be like articles kind of floating around all over the place. Nothing's connected and nothing is forming a foundation.
Yep. So
go for that foundational approach, because that's the only way you're going to actually be able to build something long-term. And, in the short term, you're just going to have to deal with it. Your rankings won't be what you expect them to be, because it takes time to build up that topical authority. The problem too is that a lot of people are uncertain. And so, they publish a page and it's like, well, it's not ranking. I need more links. It's got to change my, there's metadata. There's something wrong with my metadata. Maybe my title isn't long enough, or it's too long, or, stuff like that people look towards. Yeah. Maybe I have to optimize my images, and.
Yep.
So that's it. I really would take that foundational approach. Make sure you have the supporting content in.
Yeah, and I think Abbas, we sort of have answered this question, but let me know if there's anything there that we didn't cover on this point. But I think this is an approach that we take now too with clients more frequently. Is I think a lot of people, we fall into that trap, as you said, of sort of chasing keyword difficulty or volume and sort of bouncing around from topic to topic. And given enough time, like, maybe that's fine, because you will eventually fill in all the gaps. But if you want to sort of accelerate the results that you see, what we found is like, hey, stick to the lane for a little while, right?
Yes.
Like work this topic, build a true kind of catalog of relevant content that is optimized and internal linked and all that stuff around this topic before you move on to the next juicy keyword that you want to go after.
That is so key, because otherwise you won't build that topical authority. And the other thing too is you also have to understand your competition, your SERP competition, right? If you're up against organizations that are publishing, like content daily, and you can only put out, and they already have hundreds of pieces of content on your niche, and you're only putting out like one a week, you're going to have trouble.
It's going to take you a while, for sure.
Yeah, it will. And so really what you want to do is, it's going to take you time, but you really want to focus, like how I was saying, on one specific topic and really developing that out before moving on to an adjacent one. That is the best method. And it will still take time, but it's going to be faster.
Right.
And, I can say that, and it won't sound like a cop-out because I'm not an agency. But if you are an agent, if you're using an agency, you do have to give them time.
Yeah.
That, I think, is the toughest part about being an agent, being on the agency side, is that clients often want to see instant results. And what you really have to have confidence in your agency, you have to be confident in their method.
For sure.
Because that's really what it is, because you're not going to see those results immediately. Those results are going to come months down the road.
Well, on behalf of our team, I appreciate you toss that out there. And I swear I did not pay him to say that.
We didn't even talk about this.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Okay, so we are at our hour here. We have a couple questions in the chat. I'm gonna move those over, and we're gonna kind of migrate here off the live stream and jump over to Slack for the next 30 minutes. So again, if you haven't already, please join us here on top of the funnel. We're going to bounce over to Slack, and we'll pick things back up and finish the Q&A over there.
All right. I am looking forward to it. Tyler, get those questions in, and everybody else, get your questions in.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Stephen, for your time so far, and thanks for even more of it. Thanks to everyone for joining us for today's live stream, and we'll see you in Slack here in just a couple moments.
Bye now.
Cheers.